Hi, my name is Mary Chipman. I'm with Microsoft, and I'm sitting here today with Luke Chung, the president of FMS. And what we're going to do is talk about application development during lean times. I'll let Luke tell you a little bit about FMS and how his company has survived several incidents of lean times and how he has managed to make the decisions that were necessary for his company to survive where much of his competition has fallen by the wayside. Luke?
Thank you, Mary. Pleasure being here. My name is Luke Chung. Our company is FMS. We were founded in 1986, so we're in our 23rd year of business. And we currently have three major lines of business. We have one group which provides commercial off-the-shelf products for developers in the Microsoft Access space. We're the #1 player for that community. We also have products for developers in the SQL Server, Visual Studio.net, and VB6 communities. And in that realm, we have about 50,000 customers in over 100 different countries. We have another group, our Professional Solutions Group, which creates custom database applications, both for Windows and the web, for a variety of clients, from both small shops, nonprofits, to medium and large-sized businesses, and then also government agencies from state, local governments, and the federal government. And then finally, we have a third group, our Advanced Systems Group, which creates solutions for the intelligence community and law enforcement. And there we've created a commercial product called Sentinel Visualizer, which combines data analysis, link analysis, social network analysis, geospatial and timeline layers to help analysts find the relationships between people, places, and things, and people who are doing bad things. And so that group is focused on those solutions for primarily the intelligence community.
Luke, you have three different lines of business. Is there any one of those three which carry the other two, or are they all sort of equal?
Well, all three businesses are supposed to be profitable on their own. They're not supposed to subsidize each other ever, but the way it works out is that sometimes they do. But we have three different business models, three different strategies for each of those businesses. And the idea is that with that diversification, it can smooth out the ups and downs of each of those businesses. So, for instance, on the product side, that is a low-touch business model, very transactional, very marketing-focused, and it allows us to generate revenue without having to put in incremental work for that specific amount of revenue, which is wonderful in the licensing business when it works properly, but of course we're reinvesting over time to create new versions of products. And one of the cycles that's involved there is the underlying product cycle that our products support from Microsoft. So those go through a version cycle based on, say, the cycles of Office. Meanwhile, on our consulting services business, that's a high-touch, high-relationship type of business model, longer sales cycles, and highly volatile or fluctuating revenue based on when projects start, stop, or pause. And so part of the challenge in that business is to smooth out the demand and keep utilization rates high for the development team. And then finally, our third group, which is focused on law enforcement, intelligence community, and DoD, that, again, has a very long sales cycle and involves really a combination of a commercial license with some customization that we create for specific missions. So it's really combined the strength of both of them. And that was a venture that we went into to diversify ourselves from products specifically focused on the developer community or end user community within Microsoft to a vertical solution.
Well, I know, speaking from the perspective of a developer solutions, I was one of your early customers with the Total Access Analyzer way back in, I think it was Access 1.1,
Yep.
when you started developing that. And I know that you've retained a lot of your original developer talent. And, typically in our industry, developers move around from company to company, job to job. I've been through several jobs since then. And yet you've retained your talent. How do you do that? How do you keep, they're loyal, they obviously are happy working for you. What do you attribute that to?
I think part of it is working together and trying to create a greater good. I've been blessed with a great team of developers who've been with me for a long time. Dan Hott, my executive vice president, has been with me for over 15 years. Jim Ferguson, one of our chief architects, has been with us for over 10 years. Michelle Swan, my vice president of Professional Solutions Group, has been there for 10 years. So it's been great to have a team who are dedicated, who really are experts in their field. It just makes the environment a wonderful place to work with such talented people. And I guess, I'm in there as well, and we're all in there together as a team to try to do this. I mean, I think one of the examples would be when 9/11 occurred, Dan Hott took it upon himself to create this solution that we now have as our Sentinel Visualizer program to address the challenges that the intelligence community had in trying to catch terrorists. And so that was something that spawned out of our environment, and I'm very proud to be a part of that.
Yes, that's a fascinating product, the Sentinel Visualizer, when you originally demoed it for me a couple of years ago, because I kind of saw that it had a lot of potential, not just for law enforcement, but it's really about the relationships between pieces of information. And it seems like there's a lot of different approaches to that in the industry today. And being able to visualize information, we're bombarded with so much of it. There's so much fragmentary information all over the place. A search result, you get like one simple search is like 50,000 hits. Like, how do you make sense of so much information? Where are you going with the visualizer? Is it still mainly a law enforcement product, or do you see a wider applicability for it?
Well, we definitely see a wider applicability for it in terms of lots of different commercial applications, but we're focusing our limited resources and sales and efforts in those two specific segments of the market. And it just seems most appropriate, and the highest level of interest that we've gotten have been in the intelligence, DoD, law enforcement to start. Although we have some customers in the pharmaceutical and logistics and other related fields. One of the things that has held true for our organization over all the years that we've been in business is that we have focused on creating environments to help decision makers make better choices with data. So whether it was back in the DOS days when we first started the business to where we are today, it was all about getting data that people had and showing it in new ways so that they could better understand what was going on. That is actually something that someone told me when I was in high school, kind of like in The Graduate, where Dustin Hoffman is told to get into plastics. I was told by an older person, the way to make money or the way to serve the world in the future is you're going to take people's data and you're going to sell it back to them. And I had no idea what he was talking about. But, things happen, and really that's the business that we're in. We take people's data. We don't create the data. We manipulate it. We cut it, dice it, show it in different ways, and present it back.
Well, for as long as you've been in business, just to talk about the data platform for a moment, obviously you haven't been on the Microsoft platform all of those years. At some point, you might decided that Microsoft was the way to go. Tell us a little bit about the early years, what happened, and how you got on the Microsoft platform, and what you see for the future.
Okay. Well, when I first started the business in 1986, PCs were still considered toys, at least in the business community. Real business work wasn't done on PCs per se. And I got involved with one of the early desktop database applications, Paradox, which was geared more towards the business analyst than it was towards the programmer. And so I was working at a management consulting firm, and instead of going to business school, I thought I'd give it a try to create a business that would create database applications on PCs. I thought I'd give it a year, and if it didn't work out, I'd go to graduate school and be a good corporate soldier the rest of my life. So Thankfully, 23 years later, I haven't had to go to graduate school yet, and the party still seems to be moving forward. So, we started out in DOS. We started out with small clients or small applications, and it grew over time. Now, when Windows came along in the early 90s, Windows 3, there wasn't a database for Windows, and Microsoft rolled out Access, which took the market by storm. At that time, we were a leading third-party partner for Borland International, which owned both Paradox and Ashton Tate, the owners of DBase. They had 85% market share of the desktop database market. Microsoft had 0. And when we saw how powerful Microsoft Access was in 1992, and also the turmoil within Borland in addressing a solution for Windows, we made the decision that we had to support Access. But it wasn't an overnight, we're abandoning Borland kind of decision. The decision we made was we were going to diversify, and we were going to add resources or apply resources towards solutions for Microsoft Access so that we could let the market decide where we should go. And so part of the experience and part of the success that we've had over the years is listening to customers, trying to understand what their needs are, where they're going, and making sure that we're serving them and not trying to push a particular technology or a particular vendor. The critical piece is understanding the solution that customers need.
Well, obviously, the terrain has changed considerably since the early 90s. Access has now kind of moved off
Absolutely.
the center stage, and we're looking at SQL Server. Now we have Project Gemini, Excel, self-service BI is looming on the horizon. What do you see are the challenges for the Microsoft Data Platform at all similar to the challenges that, say, Borland faced back in the 90s? What are your customers finding today? Where's the market? Where do you think the market is moving with your customers? What are you hearing?
Right. Well, I mean, what we're seeing is, a real balkanization, really, of all the technology. There's just so many different kinds of technology out there. There aren't necessarily dominant players in all the platforms. And each of the platforms has become much more complex. So it's very difficult for somebody to be an expert in more than one platform, and sometimes very difficult to be even an expert in one platform. For instance, SQL Server, you also, you have the DBA side of it. You also have to have a front end to any SQL Server application, so whether it's in .NET or Java or whatever it is, you need to know that. Then there's reporting services and analysis services and all sorts of things that are sitting on top of that that make it very challenging to be a guru or expert on all of it. At the same time, you have things like SharePoint, and then in a bigger enterprise type of environment, you'll have an Oracle solution, you'll have an SAP solution, and then, of course, all sorts of desktop solutions on top of that. So those things didn't exist 20 years ago, but the value of today is that those things are there, and the challenge is how do you combine all of those? How do you understand the strengths and weaknesses of each so that you can put together a solution that matches the needs of the particular mission that you're trying to address?
So you don't really see any, do you see any direct competitors in terms of, the primacy of SQL Server in the heart of your business?
Well, we are a Microsoft shop, so we are currently a Microsoft exclusive organization. We create .NET applications, we create Windows applications on Office, Excel, Access, but we will link to data sources of any kind. But that's where our strengths and skill sets are. If we see that moving significantly so that there isn't a business place there, then yeah, that's certainly something that we would want to address. Being in the D.C. area, in this new administration, we're seeing lots of changes. Obama has come up with the whole concept of a CTO and has hired a CTO at the top level, a Chief Technology Officer. Each of the departments has a Chief Technology Officer now. There's a Chief Accountability Officer. So there's a lot of new approaches to dealing with technology, and I think the president has a very good personal grasp of what technology can do, as evidenced by his campaign compared to his competitors. That Web 2.0 and social networking and how you get the community to be more involved in design and development, not necessarily in the open source sense, but just in driving features, has tremendous impact. And so having a mechanism or process where listening to end user feedback becomes much, much more critical, because end users are expecting it. They do it in other parts of their experience on the internet and elsewhere.
So as a Microsoft solution, what is the title? Solution partner?
We're Gold Certified Partner.
Gold Certified Partner. What would be some feedback that you would have as, like, in terms of listening to the customer for Microsoft? Well, what would you want to tell them? In polite terms.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Microsoft has a lot of great products for lots of different missions that customers have. And one of the challenges I think a lot of enterprises and organizations have is trying to match up their application challenges to the technologies that Microsoft offers. Because what people have is a continuum of problems of different sizes, different severity or criticality, and there are simple things and there are complex things. There are things that can be done quick and dirty, and then there are things that have to be done perfectly because they're mission critical. And actually, Microsoft has good solutions in each of those platforms. But the continuum isn't always easy to be able to take, say, an Excel spreadsheet and, as it graduates, move it into an Access database application. And as that graduates, move it into a SQL Server application. And then as that graduates, move it into a CRM system or a dynamic system, or integrating it with SharePoint or what have you. There are significant barriers at each level. One of the interesting things that we see that we think Microsoft doesn't appreciate is the large numbers of applications that information workers have created with Office. I mean, Office is by far the #1 application, professional application that's deployed out there. People are creating millions of Excel spreadsheets each year, millions of Access databases, and a tiny fraction of those migrate to the next level. And rather than the SQL Server team, let's say, looking at the Access applications as a resource, there's almost an anti-acknowledgement of the existence of these databases, or desire for these to not exist, and therefore not having a strategy, a very profitable strategy, to consider this asset as a sales funnel to migrate into the next platform. And the result of this is we're seeing in Europe a significant migration of Access applications to MySQL. This is particularly so in Germany. And then in the US or in other places, we see Oracle targeting these Access databases as a great opportunity to grow their business. So those are threats that we see and we hear from our customers.
So why would Oracle target Access specifically?
Well, the basic idea is databases don't just fall out of the tree by themselves. Rarely do new applications get created from scratch without having a prototype or an existing application that serves part of the function. I mean, in general, these applications evolve over time, and as they become more successful, they justify the additional investment that's needed to take it to the next level. So when you're dealing with a SQL Server application or Oracle application, it's not uncommon to have budgets of $100,000, $1 million to create these solutions. Well, when they first started out, nobody could justify spending that kind of money to create it. You would have been laughed out of the room. When Oracle looks at their business, where are they going to be able to create new databases? Well, they're looking for existing databases. It's very hard to migrate or to look at an existing SQL Server database and say, oh, here we can offer you more functionality, you'll have to spend this money to migrate it. The value justification may not be there. However, you could take a desktop application and show how a file server solution is much weaker than the offerings that you can have in a client server platform like a MySQL or Oracle. And now you can justify the cost of adding that functionality to those applications. And so if an organization already has, say, Oracle licenses, or they're comfortable with that platform, this is a prime hunting ground to find more solutions that should be moved over to their platform.
Interesting. Yes, and I know from experience that it is there's a certain amount of a ramp up, like it's a gradual curve as you get expertise, say, in access, and you gain mastery of the desktop platform. And then there's this big chasm where the migration tools and the migration assistant will sort of get you like 75% over the chasm, and then you fall off this steep cliff, and then there's the climb up the other side to get to the same level of expertise on a server database like SQL Server that you might have had on your desktop database or your Excel spreadsheet or whatever you're coming from. So essentially, it's an education issue in a way, both of educating, the people on the SQL Server side that, hey, this is an opportunity here, as well as like the departmental developer or the power user on the Access Excel side that needs to go to the next level, but they need somebody to reach the handout over that last 25%.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's an organizational strategic positioning place of what resources they have. I mean, really, we see this as a budgeting issue. I mean, an IT staff, an IT organization can hire all the resources they need. The same person that created the application on the desktop does not need to be the person that creates it on another platform. They need to understand each other, but as long as the organization anticipates on an annual basis that a certain percentage or a certain number of these applications need to migrate and can get the budget to hire the people to do that, this can be a very smooth process. It's a matter of anticipating and just saying, hey, we're going to have some of this and we're going to take it out of the line of business. We're going to provide a service to the line of business to escalate or graduate their applications to a more professional, more robust, more secure type of environment. Prior to this, it didn't make sense to spend that kind of money. Now it can be justified.
You've often used a military commander metaphor to talk about these kind of decisions, about IT decisions in data migrations and the data platform. In closing, would you just like to elaborate a little on that of what happens when the application lands on the IT doorstep? And
Sure. I mean, the chief technology officer of an organization is very similar, I think, to the commanding general of a large army, or say, the U.S. commanding general in Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, that person, that general, has at his disposal all sorts of different weapons and resources available to him to deal with all sorts of different issues, whether it's, bullets to go door to door, or, aerial bombs, tanks, maybe nukes, right? And each of these weapons solve certain types of problems, and they're not appropriate for others. You can solve problems by saying, oh, I can use a bullet to take that person out, or I can use a nuke and take out the town. Well, one's a lot more expensive than the other and can cause a lot of other problems. It's just not appropriate. So you want to have lots of different weapons available to address different challenges. When it comes to IT, it's the same thing. Some problems are small and should be handled by end users, and other problems are really complex, mission critical for the organization. We absolutely have to get it correct, and you want your best talent on there with the best technology to do it. Right? So you're running a hospital, there are real mission critical systems there to make sure people don't die. It's very different from a spreadsheet that somebody might accidentally not save or delete. Nobody cares too much about that. It's a whole different scale. So you need to address these things differently. And the idea is that, yeah, sure, you can do things on the low end, quick and dirty, and that may work or it may not. Sometimes things go awry, but it's not a mission critical, or it's not as big a deal. Now, in terms of IT organizations and why they hate these desktop applications being created by end users is because they show up on their doorsteps unannounced. An organization that isn't anticipating, isn't planning for these applications to come to them, find this to be extremely troubling. And oftentimes these applications show up when the line of business manager says, oh, you know, this has been a great application. We're making a lot of money with this thing. Now, you know, we need to make this, we need to add a whole bunch of new features. Oh, and by the way, yeah, I forgot, we had an IT staff. You know, we're paying them millions of dollars a year. They should be able to take care of this. And that line of business manager, you know, sometimes golfs with the CEO, right? So he outranks the IT manager in terms of social scale within the organization. And when this application shows up in the IT shops on their doorstep, it comes with a lot of pressure, political pressure that becomes very difficult to address. The way to deal with that is to make sure that the organization has this all in place, is anticipating, and there are actually people hired and ready to go when these applications show up. And this is very similar to the military. You have lots of people going out there, special forces, whatever, knocking down doors. They do things on their own, but when they get into trouble, they call for support. And when they call for support, support is available because the general has planned that, hey, a certain percentage, 1%, 10%, whatever it is, of the situations will require additional support. And they don't argue at the time, well, I'm not going to give you the support. Why did you get into that trouble yourself? You know, get yourself out of it. They provide overwhelming support. That's the mission. That's the way it works. And somehow we train testosterone-filled guys to be able to call for help when it comes to the military. Well, the same thing should occur in an organization for business when it comes to IT. The value that you get out of it is not that you're coming in with support, but the idea is that support is provided for a small fraction of the challenges that the organization faced. So people are taking care of 90% of the problem on their own, and maybe 10% or 1% needs additional resources from IT. Handled that correctly, you can reduce costs for getting things done. You don't have your high-level IT talent wasting their time creating solutions that go nowhere. Could be a perfect solution, but the business changed, so you know the application is useless. And so then you can balance out where the money should go once these applications justify themselves in real life.
Thank you so much, Luke. That's really interesting. You know, so think like the commander in chief. You know.
Thank you for having me, Mary. It's a pleasure.